In ancient Greek mythology, the heroes Perseus and Theseus embody different aspects of strength and valor. The first is a demigod who defeated the terrible Medusa. The second is a king who destroyed the Minotaur. But can their power be objectively compared? This question has been on people's minds for thousands of years, as both accomplished incredible feats described in ancient sources. Today we will delve into the reliable facts from the works of Hesiod, Apollodorus, Pausanias, and Plutarch to shed light on this eternal debate. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let's get started. In ancient texts, whether it be Hesiod's Theogony or Pseudo-Apollodorus's systematic library by Pseudo-Apollodorus, there are no canonical narratives in which Perseus and Theseus fought each other, or even crossed paths in a way that was significant to the plot. Their mythological cycles belong to different geographical and cultural spaces. Perseus is the hero of Argos, the progenitor of a great family, and the founder of Mycenae. His story is a Peloponnesian legend, ancient, dating back to the Bronze Age. Theseus, on the other hand, is the hero of Attica, the symbol of Athens. His exploits are closely woven into the political mythology of the city, explaining and legitimizing its rise. The story of Perseus begins with a miracle, with the direct intervention of the supreme god. His grandfather, Acrisius, king of Argos, having received a prophecy about his death at the hands of his own grandson, imprisoned his daughter Danae in a bronze chamber built underground. He created the perfect prison, which no mortal could penetrate. But for the Olympian ruler, there are no barriers. Zeus, captivated by Danae's beauty, poured himself into her prison in a shower of gold. From this divine union, Perseus was born. His origin is not just a fact of genealogy, it is a mark of being chosen.
He is a demigod in the truest sense of the word, with the blood of the thunderer flowing through his veins. This endows him not only with innate valor, but also with the invisible protection of Olympus. His path has been predetermined by the will of the gods from the very beginning. He is a tool in their hands, even if he himself is unaware of it. The picture is completely different for Theseus. His birth is shrouded in mystery, but it is an earthly, human mystery. He is the son of the Athenian king Aegeus and Aphrodite, daughter of the king of Troezen. However, there is a second, equally plausible version, according to which his father was Poseidon himself, the god of the seas, who took possession of Aphra on the same night as Aegeus. This duality is extremely important. It allows Theseus to be both the legitimate heir to the Athenian throne, a man of flesh and blood, and the bearer of the divine spark. Unlike Perseus, whose divine origin is indisputable, Theseus' status required confirmation. Before sailing to Athens, Aegeus left his sword and sandals under a huge rock, instructing Aphra to send his son to him only when he could move the boulder and retrieve these symbols of royal dignity. This initiation rite emphasizes a key feature of Theseus. He had to prove his right and his strength. His power is not so much a gift from above as the result of his own efforts and will. This difference in origin is perfectly illustrated by a comparison from modern culture that everyone can understand. Perseus is a kind of Superman, an alien from another planet whose strength is an innate trait. Theseus is Batman, a man who, through training, intellect, and unyielding will, has risen to the pinnacle of human potential. One embodies divine will, the intervention of higher powers in the affairs of mortals. The other embodies human initiative, the desire of mortals to determine their own destiny and establish justice. It is precisely this difference in their starting positions, in the very nature of their heroic essence, that makes us remember these stories again and again. They are like two poles of the same magnet, two sides of the same coin called heroism. And when we reread the myths familiar from childhood, it is as if we return to that room where, under the light of a nightlight, we first discovered a world in which gods descended to earth and people performed deeds worthy of gods. For Perseus, this monster was Medusa the Gorgon. It is important to understand that this is not just a monster. Medusa is the embodiment of horror, a creature from the border zone of the world, from those uncharted areas where the order of the cosmos ends and primeval chaos begins. She is one of 3 sisters, daughters of the sea deities Phorcys and Ceto, offspring of the ancient pre-Olympian era. Unlike her immortal sisters, Spheno and Euryale, Medusa was mortal. According to one version, described by Ovid in Metamorphoses, she was once a beautiful maiden, a priestess in the temple of Athena, whose hair was the object of envy. Poseidon, inflamed with passion for her, took possession of her right in the sanctuary. The offended warrior goddess did not punish the powerful god, but unleashed her wrath on her victim. Medusa's beautiful hair turned into a tangle of hissing snakes, and her gaze became deadly, turning all living things to stone. Thus, Perseus's quest is not just a hunt for a monster. It is a mission to undo the consequences of divine injustice and desecration. His enemy is not brute physical force, but magical, paralyzing power, a curse that works from a distance. Medusa cannot be defeated in fair combat. To look at her is to lose, to turn into your own tombstone. Therefore, Perseus's entire feat is a chain of tricks, evasive maneuvers, and the use of miraculous artifacts. He does not seek Medusa himself. The gods show him the way. First, he must find the Graeae, 3 prophetic sisters who share one eye and one tooth between them. Perseus does not defeat them by force. He takes their eye away from them at the moment when they pass it to each other and blackmails them into revealing the way to the nymphs, the keepers of divine gifts. This is a test of wit, not muscle. The duel with Medusa itself is the apotheosis of indirect combat. Perseus uses winged sandals to move through the air, Hades' invisibility cap to remain unseen by the immortal Gorgon sisters, and, most importantly, Athena's shield, polished to a mirror shine. He does not look at the monster itself, but at its reflection, moving backwards, guided by the distorted image on the bronze. He strikes, cutting off the head without seeing his target directly. It is a victory of technology over nature, of reason over horror, of strategy over paralyzing fear. Perseus' strength here lies in his ability to follow the instructions of the gods, in his trust in miraculous objects, in his composure in the face of the inexpressible. He is the perfect executor of the divine plan. The challenge posed to Theseus was entirely different. His enemy, the Minotaur, was a monster of a different kind. If Medusa was the product of ancient chaos and divine wrath, then the Minotaur was the shameful secret of the civilized world, the fruit of unnatural passion and royal sin. He was born from the union of Pasiphae, wife of the Cretan king Minos, and a sacred bull sent by Poseidon.
Minos, in his pride, refused to sacrifice the bull as promised, and the angry god inspired his wife with monstrous lust. The Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, became a living reproach to the royal house, a symbol of the animal nature hidden under the veil of power and wealth. And to hide this shame, the great master Daedalus built the labyrinth, a brilliant engineering structure, a symbol of confusion and hopelessness. Theseus goes to Crete not at the behest of the gods. He is driven by a sense of duty and a thirst for glory. At that time, Athens was a vassal of Crete and was obliged to send 7 young men and 7 young women every 9 years to be eaten by the Minotaur. This was payment for the murder of Minos' son in Athens. Theseus voluntarily offers to be among the victims in order to end this humiliating tribute. His motivation is political and humanistic. He does not simply kill the monster, he liberates his city.
Unlike Perseus, Theseus has no magical artifacts. His battle is a duel in pitch darkness, in a confined space. The labyrinth itself is part of the test. It is not an open space where one can maneuver, but a claustrophobic trap that weighs on the psyche. A mirrored shield or invisibility cap would be of no use here. What is needed here is brute force, courage, and the ability to navigate. Most sources agree that Theseus killed the Minotaur with his bare hands, or, according to another version, with his own sword. It was a close, brutal fight. Plutarch, seeking to rationalize the myth, even suggested that the Minotaur was not a monster, but a cruel commander of King Minos named Taurus, whom Theseus defeated in a fistfight at the funeral games. But in the classic version of the myth, it was a battle between man and beast, between reason and rage. And here it is not a god who comes to Theseus' aid, but a woman.
Ariadne, Minos' daughter, who fell in love with the Athenian hero, gives him not a magical weapon, but a simple yet ingenious idea, a ball of thread. This ball of thread is a symbol of logic, a guiding thread of reason in the labyrinth of the unconscious. It allows Theseus to do what no one before him has been able to do, not only to win, but also to return. Theseus's victory is a triumph of human intelligence, courage, and help based on love, not divine patronage. His strength lies in his humanity, in his ability to find a way out of a trap created by man. Comparing their main feats, we see two completely different approaches to heroism. Perseus is an agent of supernatural forces who defeated an ancient horror with the help of magic. Theseus is a representative of humanity who overcame the vice of civilization with the help of strength, mind, and love. This difference is also evident in their subsequent deeds. Perseus's path after defeating Medusa is a series of miraculous adventures. On his way back, he flies over Ethiopia and sees the beautiful Princess Andromeda chained to a rock, sacrificed to the sea monster Ceto. This is another monster from the ancient chaotic world. Perseus fights and defeats it, using Medusa's head to turn the monster to stone. He then marries the rescued princess. This is a classic plot of a chivalric romance, where the hero saves a damsel in distress and receives her as a reward. Andromeda here is the object of salvation, a beautiful prize. Her role is passive. Theseus's journey to Athens after Crete is not a fairy tale adventure, but a purposeful mission to establish order. He deliberately chooses the land route, infested with bandits, in order to clear it and make it safe for travelers. Each of his battles along the way is an act of justice. He kills the robber Procrustes by laying him on his own bed and cutting off or stretching his legs to fit.
This is not just murder. It is the restoration of justice according to the principle of Talion. The measure you use will be used against you. He defeats Sinus Pidiocompt, the pine bender, who tore travelers apart by tying them to two sloping trees, and does the same to him. He kills the robber Skyron, who forced travelers to wash his feet on the edge of a cliff, and then threw them into the sea to be eaten by a giant turtle. Theseus throws Skyron himself into the sea. These 6 feats on the way to Athens are not a struggle with mythical monsters, but a struggle with human cruelty and social evil. Theseus appears here not simply as a warrior, but as a legislator, a civilizer who uses force to establish the principles of justice, dike, where violence, bia, reigns. Even their attitude towards women, as we have already seen in the examples of Andromeda and Ariadne, differs radically and reveals their characters. Perseus is faithful to Andromeda. Their union becomes the basis of the royal dynasty from which the greatest of heroes, Heracles, will descend. His personal life is stable and is a continuation of his heroic feat. Ariadne's fate, on the contrary, is tragic and casts a shadow on Theseus. According to the most common version of the myth, he abandons her, asleep, on the island of Naxos on his way to Athens. The reasons for this act are unclear. Some say that the god Dionysus appeared to him in a dream and demanded that he give him the Cretan princess. Others say that Theseus was simply afraid to bring the daughter of an enemy king to Athens. But the fact remains, he abandons the woman who saved his life. This act demonstrates the pragmatism, perhaps even cruelty and ingratitude, hidden in the character of the Athenian hero. He is a politician for whom the end, returning and reigning in Athens, can justify the means. His personal relationships are sacrificed to his ambitions, and this shadow of tragedy will haunt him for the rest of his life.
Returning to Athens in the euphoria of victory, he forgets to change the black sail on his ship to white as agreed with his father. Aegeus, seeing the black sail from the Acropolis, decides that his son has perished and, in despair, throws himself into the sea, which has since borne his name, the Aegean. Thus Theseus becomes king, but his accession to the throne is overshadowed by the death of his father, for which he is indirectly responsible. This is a classic element of Greek tragedy, a fatal mistake, hamartia, that sets off a chain of misfortunes. Perseus does not have such tragic guilt. Yes, he ultimately fulfills the prophecy and accidentally kills his grandfather Acrisius at the games by throwing a discus that is blown off course by the wind. But this is perceived not as his personal fault, but as the inevitability of fate, Moira. He is a toy in the hands of the gods and fate, and his actions, even tragic ones, do not bear the mark of his personal choice or moral shortcoming. The end of their life journey is as indicative as its beginning. Perseus, having accomplished all his feats, rules long and wisely, founds Mycenae, and in the end, together with Andromeda, the gods raise him to the sky, turning him into a constellation. His finale is apotheosis, deification, eternal glory recorded in the starry sky. It is a perfect fairy tale ending for a perfect hero. Theseus's life ends ingloriously and tragically. His reign in Athens was glorious. He united Attica, established the Panathenaic Games, and, according to some versions, laid the foundations of democracy. But his personal life was full of disasters. His wife Phaedra fell in love with his son Hippolytus, and when he rejected her, she slandered him, leading to his death. Theseus himself, blinded by grief and anger, cursed his own son. Later, overcome with hubris, he and his friend Pirithous descend into the realm of Hades to kidnap Persephone herself.
This audacious plan ends in disaster. Hades chains them to a rock. Theseus is eventually rescued by Heracles, but part of his flesh remains attached to the rock. Returning to the world of the living, he discovers that the Athenians have forgotten him and elected another king. Exiled from his own city, he finds refuge with King Lycomedes on the island of Skyros, but the latter, fearing his fame, treacherously pushes him off a cliff into the sea. Thus ends the journey of the great reformer king, in exile, killed out of envy. His ending is a deeply human tragedy about the futility of fame and the ingratitude of the crowd. It shows that even the greatest of mortals is not immune to downfall. So who was stronger? If we understand strength as a combination of physical power, divine protection, and the ability to overcome supernatural horrors, then Perseus, son of Zeus, seems to be the undisputed favorite. He acts on a cosmic scale. His enemies are the spawn of chaos, and his allies are the Olympian gods. But what if strength is something more? What if it is steadfastness in the face of human cruelty, the ability to bear the burden of responsibility for one's people, the intelligence to find a way out of a hopeless situation, and the courage to live on after making tragic mistakes? Then Theseus, with all his flaws, tragedies, and inglorious end, appears as a hero of a different, perhaps deeper and more complex order. His strength lies in his imperfect but unyielding humanity. Perseus is a shining legend frozen in the night sky. Theseus is a living, breathing lesson in history, relevant to this day. This difference permeates the very fabric of their arsenal, which is not just a set of tools, but a metaphorical reflection of their essence. Perseus's artifacts are, in essence, a divine cheat code, a set of ready-made solutions to unsolvable problems. Hermes' winged sandals give him mobility beyond that of any human.
Aeolus's cap of invisibility grants absolute stealth, a gift from the underworld itself. The bag, kibesis, capable of safely holding the deadly head, is a unique container for unimaginable power. These items were not created by humans and cannot be reproduced. They emphasize that Perseus is the chosen one, acting beyond human laws and capabilities. His task is not to invent, but to use correctly what the higher powers have given him. Even his final weapon, Medusa's head itself, is not his own power, but a trophy, a monstrous power that he merely directs. And there is also deep symbolism in this. He, a mortal, briefly becomes the bearer of the power of chthonic horror, capable of turning enemies to stone. He does not simply defeat chaos, he temporarily puts it at his service, which is a privilege available only with the sanction of Olympus. Theseus's arsenal, on the other hand, is decidedly mundane. His main weapon is a sword left by his father under a rock. It is not a magical blade, but a symbol of legitimate authority and hereditary duty. In his battle with the Minotaur, he relies on his fists and physical endurance. And his main artifact, Ariadne's ball of thread, is ingenious in its simplicity. It is not magic, but pure logic, a tool created by the human mind to solve a man-made problem. The labyrinth is the pinnacle of engineering, and it can be conquered not by a miracle, but by another, more subtle piece of engineering. Ariadne's thread is a symbol of memory, consistency, and a rational path through madness. It represents help based not on a divine plan, but on a human emotion, love. Thus, if Perseus receives the keys to the universe, Theseus finds the solution in a simple object from a sewing basket. His strength lies in his ability to see genius in the ordinary and to use human connections as his greatest resource. It is worth taking a deeper look at the psychological nature of their enemies. Medusa is an external, objective horror. She is the absolute other, that which cannot be looked at, that which exists beyond human understanding. The battle with her is a test not so much of courage as of discipline and self-control. This is a duel not with muscles, but with nerves. Perseus must suppress his natural instinct to look at the enemy. He must act indirectly, trusting his reflection more than his own eyes. This is a victory over primitive fear, over an instinct that in this situation leads to certain death. The Minotaur, on the other hand, is an internal, introverted horror. He does not hide in distant lands, but lives in the very heart of a civilized kingdom. He is the shameful fruit of sin and deceit, a family secret locked in the basement of the palace. The labyrinth is not just a prison, it is the architectural embodiment of repression, an attempt to hide the ugly truth in endless corridors of self-deception. Therefore, Theseus's journey is not just the killing of a monster, it is an act of psychotherapy for the entire Cretan society. He descends into the subconscious of civilization to come face to face with its animalistic side. His victory is not just a physical conquest, it is a symbolic recognition and destruction of the inner demon. And Ariadne's thread here is the guiding thread of reason, which allows one not to get lost in the labyrinths of one's own eye and return to the light. Theseus proves that the most terrible monster is the one we ourselves have created and hidden. This difference in the nature of the feats is directly reflected in their social significance. Perseus is a lone hero. His deeds save specific people, his mother Danae, his wife Andromeda, but do not change the social order. The founding of Mycenae is an act of establishing personal power, creating a citadel for his family. This is a typical act of a Bronze Age king whose power is based on ancestry and military strength. Theseus, on the other hand, is a political hero, an architect of society.
His main feat, not as spectacular as the killing of the Minotaur, but far more significant for history, is Synoixis, the unification of the scattered communities of Attica around a single center, Athens. Plutarch describes in detail how Theseus went from village to village, persuading noble families and ordinary people to give up their local independence and create a common state. He promised them not tyranny, but democracy, a government without a king, where he himself would be only a military leader and guardian of the laws. He established common holidays, the Panathenea, and created a common civic identity. He did not build a fortress for himself, but a polis for the citizens. His fight against bandits in Isthmus was not just a series of battles, but a program to create a safe infrastructure, a federal highway connecting the Peloponnese with Attica. In this sense, Theseus is a hero civilizer to a much greater extent than Perseus. His strength is measured not only by the monsters he killed, but also by the state he built. It is precisely this profound humanity and political involvement that make Theseus a more complex and tragic character. His mistakes and docksides are not accidents, but a direct consequence of his character. Take, for example, his campaign against the Amazons. Driven by passion or a desire for glory, he kidnaps their queen, Antiope or Hippolyta. This personal act has catastrophic social consequences. In response, the Amazons invade Attica and besiege Athens. The battle takes place at the Acropolis itself. Theseus, the founder and defender of the city, has brought war upon it because of his impulsive desire. In this war, his beloved Antiope dies fighting on his side. This is a striking example of how a ruler's personal passions can turn into tragedy for his people. Perseus has nothing like this. His life, despite the dangers, moves along a straight, predetermined trajectory.
His accidental killing of his grandfather Acrisius is the fulfillment of fate, not the result of his personal choice or shortcoming. He is pure before men and gods because he is merely an instrument in the hands of destiny. Theseus, on the other hand, is the creator of his own destiny and therefore bears full responsibility for his decisions, both glorious and disastrous. His descent into Hades with Pirithous is not a feat, but an act of pure hubris, an attempt by a mortal to challenge the laws of the universe. And he receives his deserved punishment for this, from which he is saved only by the intervention of an even greater hero, Heracles. Finally, their posthumous fate puts the finishing touches on the story. Perseus becomes a constellation, a beautiful, distant, eternal myth. He can be looked at, admired, and used as a guide in the night sky. But he is unattainable. He has become part of the mechanics of the heavens, a beautiful story. The cult of Theseus in Athens, on the contrary, was alive, effective, and deeply social. After the Greco-Persian Wars, the Athenian commander Cimon, following the instructions of the Delphic oracle, organized an expedition to Skyros, found the remains of the giant there, and triumphantly transported them to Athens. These bones of Theseus were buried in the center of the city in a specially built sanctuary, the Thesion. And this temple became not just a place of worship, but an official refuge for slaves, the poor, and all those who sought protection from the powerful. Even after his death, Theseus continued to fulfill his role as protector of the oppressed and founder of a just society. The Athenians made sacrifices to him not as a distant deity, but as their king and protector, whose spirit continued to guard the city.
He did not turn into the cold light of a star. He remained in the heart of his polis, his power continuing to influence the social and political life of Athens for centuries. Thus, when answering the question of who was stronger, we must first ask ourselves, what do we mean by strength? If it is power bestowed from above, the ability to withstand forces of unimaginable horror and flawlessly accomplish one's mission, then Perseus wins in this category. He is the ideal model of a mythological hero whose life is like a perfect poem. But if strength is the ability to build, unite, make difficult decisions, and take responsibility for their consequences, if it is the courage to face not only external monsters, but also internal demons, if it is the willingness to make mistakes, fall, and still remain a symbol of hope for his people, then Theseus, with all his tragic and imperfect fate, turns out to be immeasurably stronger. His story is not a legend frozen in the heavens, but an eternally living novel about a man who dared to take on the burden of being fully human. It is also worth noting the power that is measured not in personal deeds, but in legacy, in the blood flowing through the veins of descendants. And here Perseus takes on a completely different, titanic dimension. Through his son Perseus, he became the progenitor of the Persian kings, as Herodotus claimed, linking the mythology of Hellas with the greatest empire of the East. But his Greek lineage is much more important. He is the great-grandfather of the greatest of all heroes, the pan-Hellenic champion, the son of Zeus and Alcmene, Heracles. All the power, all 12 labors, all the world-shaking deeds of Heracles are, in essence, a continuation and culmination of the heroic blood brought into the world by Perseus. Perseus's strength proved to be genetically dominant, producing a demigod who surpassed all mortals and even the gods themselves in some of his deeds. Against this backdrop, Theseus's legacy seems much more modest. His sons, Achamanthus and Demophan, were valiant warriors who fought in the Trojan War and are known for rescuing their grandmother Aethra, who had become Helen's slave, from Troy. This was a noble but purely human deed. They did not shake the foundations of the world or fight cosmic forces. They were good soldiers and loyal grandsons. Thus, if Perseus begot a superhuman, Theseus begot only worthy men. The scale of their geographical theater of action is also different. Perseus' journey takes him beyond the oikumene, the world known to the Greeks. He flies to the edge of the earth, to the misty reaches of the ocean, where the Gorgons dwell, to a region not marked on maps, symbolizing the other side of reality. Then his path lies through the scorching sands of Libya, where drops of Medusa's blood give birth to poisonous snakes, and to Ethiopia, on the southern border of the world. He is a pioneering hero, a cosmonaut of his time, whose exploits expand the boundaries of what is possible for the Greeks. Theseus, on the other hand, is a deeply local hero, a homebody. His exploits are concentrated in a very narrow area: Trizena, the dusty roads of Isthmus, Athens, Crete. This is all within the waters of the Saronic Gulf. He does not discover new worlds, he brings order to his own home. His task is to make the already known space safe and unified, to transform wild Attica into a civilized state. If Perseus broadens horizons, Theseus cultivates his garden. These are two different types of power, the power of expansion and the power of consolidation. It is also interesting to note how they interacted with other heroes, in particular with Heracles. In this comparison, Theseus again finds himself in the position of a junior, dependent partner. During his imprisonment in Hades, it is his cousin Heracles who descended to fetch Cerberus who frees him. The picture described by mythographers is full of humiliating drama. The great king of Athens, the hero of the labyrinth, sits chained to a rock, powerless and broken, until the mighty Hercules tears him away by brute force.
This episode unequivocally places Theseus one step lower in the unofficial hierarchy of heroes. Perseus, on the other hand, never needed such a rescue. He himself was a savior, and his path did not intersect with the deeds of other great warriors, because his mission was unique and took place in dimensions inaccessible to others. He was a soloist, performing a part written for him by the gods, while Theseus often performed in an ensemble, whether it was the Argonaut's voyage or the Caledonian hunt. And even in this ensemble, he did not always play first fiddle. It is worth taking a closer look at the nature of their mistakes. Theseus's fatal mistake with the sail is a tragedy of human psychology. He was not a villain, but simply a young man intoxicated by victory and love, who, in the turmoil of his emotions, forgot a vitally important promise. This makes his image incredibly relatable and understandable. His guilt is the guilt of forgetfulness, which is common to everyone. Similarly, his cruelty towards his own son Hippolytus, whom he cursed after believing his wife's slander, is a tragedy of paternal anger and blindness. He acts under the influence of emotion, like an ordinary mortal, and only later realizes the horror of what he has done. Perseus, on the other hand, is completely devoid of such psychological depth and moral dilemmas. He acts like a flawless machine. Even when he uses Medusa's head after his return, he does so with cold efficiency. He turns King Polydectes and his henchmen, who tried to force his mother into marriage, into stone, an act of just retribution. He turns the Titan Atlas, who refused him hospitality, into a mountain, a demonstration of divine power. There is no doubt, no reflection, no tragic mistake in his actions.
He is the sword in the hand of justice, and the sword has no remorse. Their victories also have completely different consequences. For Perseus, his triumph over Medusa means acquiring the ultimate weapon. The Gorgon's head becomes his main argument in any dispute, a guarantee of security and power. He actively uses it, solving his problems with a single deadly glance. For Theseus, victory over the Minotaur immediately turns into a series of losses and problems. He gains fame, but loses Ariadne. He returns home a victor, but becomes the cause of his father's death. His triumph is poisoned with bitterness from the very beginning. He does not get his hands on a magical artifact that would solve all his problems. On the contrary, his victory only gives rise to new, even more complex challenges, now not on the battlefield, but in the sphere of politics and family relations. This teaches him that heroic strength, effective against monsters, is almost useless in the face of human tragedies and political intrigues. Perseus leaves the stage at the peak of his magical power, while Theseus is forced to learn to live in a world where his muscles and courage are no longer the main argument. Procrustes, who perverted the sacred concept of hospitality, Xenia, by offering travelers a bed that became an instrument of torture, was not just a bandit, but a philosophical problem. Theseus, applying his own method to him, does not simply take revenge, but restores the very idea of proportionality and justice. It was not a massacre, but a series of vivid lessons on the basics of law, where punishment mirrored the crime. Their attitude towards the chthonic world, the realm of the dead, also reveals their essence. Perseus receives his main attribute, the cap of invisibility, from Hades as a gift, as an authorized borrowing of power from another world to carry out a mission in this one. He is a legitimate user.
Theseus, on the contrary, invades Hades as an invader, driven not by duty, but by his friend's arrogant desire to obtain the goddess. His imprisonment there is not just a failure, but a sentence for violating the cosmic order. Perseus acts in harmony with the divine plan, even when he uses the powers of darkness. Theseus challenges this plan and is crushed. This difference persists even in their posthumous presence. Perseus's legacy is astronomical, immaterial. His story is immortalized in the constellations, in the eternal dance of the stars, which can only be viewed from below. It is a myth that has become part of the celestial map. Theseus's legacy, on the contrary, is material and tangible. It is his supposed bones, which became a relic and the center of a sanctuary in Athens. It is the stones of synoikism, the physical union of lands. Perseus could be addressed in prayer while looking at the stars. An Athenian could come to Theseus, touch the walls of his temple, seeking very real legal protection. One remained an eternal image, the other a functioning social institution. Even their weapons reflect this dichotomy. After completing her mission, Medusa's head was returned to the goddess Athena, leaving the world of men and becoming an ornament on her aegis. Theseus's sword, on the other hand, remained in Athens as a symbol of royal succession, earthly power passed down by inheritance. A direct comparison of the power of Perseus and Theseus is incorrect due to differences in the context of their exploits. Perseus embodies divine power and the fulfillment of the will of the gods, while Theseus embodies human valor and intelligence. Ultimately, each hero is strong in his own way, and their legends continue to inspire, reminding us that strength is multifaceted.